Welcome to another dot mandala tutorial. Today we're going to be doing some joyful hearts. First, trace a heart on a stone and then paint the inside black with a good satin paint. Then use your smallest stylus and dot around that in white. Now I'm using some circular objects to trace some arcs onto the stone, and I'm going to be using these transfer punches as my tools today. I'll be telling more about those in the comments on the video. I'm also going to be using these very small embossing tools. This has a very fine point and will help me with the smallest dots. So I mixed up some paints and I'm going to paint in the first half circle with the paintbrush, and then I'm going to start dotting. I'm making 3 medium-sized dots, and then I'm going to be doing small dots all the way around the outside of those and doing a double row. Give it a little shot with the blow dryer to help that set. Doing the next row all the way around. Now I'm setting in some medium-sized green dots, and then I'll be walking 2 rows around those. I decided on a slightly lighter shade of green for the second row. Then I put 2 green dots on the outside of that row, and I decided to fill in this half circle before I did anything else. So I'm using a chartreuse on that, and then I'm going to fill that space in. Just started measuring with my tools to see what will fit. This is a very light peach color, and I'll put that on either side. And I'm going to walk a couple chartreuse dots up to the larger green ones, and I still have a little bit more space to fill. So I'm just going to put in a few more green dots. As long as you're putting both on each side, then it's symmetrical and it will look fine. Okay, now that space is filled in. I'm going to do a second coat of white on my original half circle. I put in a little bit of iridescent paint with that as well. Now I'm putting a third row of green in a medium-sized dot, following that arc. It's really nice to have a guideline there so you can just get a perfect half circle. Makes a big difference in this design. So I added a few more peach dots, and I'm going around those with my small stylus and then again in white. And putting in a very light shade of green, and now I'm switching over to my bright pink paints. Put in a medium-sized dots, and I'm going to walk around that twice. Second row is in a slightly lighter shade of pink. And now some bright orange. And now that that white has dried, I'm putting some orange on top of it. Now I'm adding some bright red. And I'm making those smaller as I go out toward the edge of the heart to give that side of the heart a little bit of a curved look. And then adding that chartreuse again along the edge. I still have a little bit of space, so I'm filling that in with the bright green. My last coat here, I'm going to be doing that bright pink. And now some top dots. I decided to put some red ones in there, and I'm putting some orange ones along the edge of the first half circle. And that's how it looks. And I did 3 different rocks, a little bit different edge treatment on each of these. And I'm going to go back with a wet Q-tip and get all of those guidelines off, and then spray them with a clear acrylic glaze. Now it was so much fun I decided to do it again. Why not? This time in some different color paints. You're probably wondering how you fill this gap and make sure that the points are equally spaced. You just kind of have to measure as you're going and eyeball it, and you probably need less dots than you think. So less is more when you're trying to fill in that last gap. Now we're going to be doing this again in blue. I'm just changing up the design slightly. I am going to walk around each of these. I'm going to make these dots as tiny as possible and do 2 rows. And then switch over to purple. Be doing the same thing. I'm going to walk around those dots. Gives it kind of a lacy look. The second row I'm doing in pink. Filling in that white with the second coat. Now going right to the chartreuse, and then I'm using the Colorshift paint in Aqua for the second row. And now I'm going to go back and fill in that space, this time in pink. I decided to do a third row, this time in blue. And I'm lining these up so I can make a sort of a radiant effect. And then I'll be going in between each of those rows with the Colorshift paint. Now back to the pink. And put a large pink dot on the edge of that row. And then I'm going to walk around those in white. I really like this stylus. The point is so small I can really get in between dots and get tiny, tiny rows in there. It really helps to have the right tool. Okay, now I'm decided to do 2 more rows in pink and purple. And that has pretty much filled in the space. I'm just going to add a few more dots. Decided to add a little bit of the chartreuse in between those 2 rows. And some dots along the white half circle. And you can see how that looks finished. They really are joyful hearts. These are very popular. Thanks for watching.